let's jump right in. Is it proper for a couple to sleep in the same bed on a night that they're not planning on being intimate?
Everything is okay. Everything is allowed. Is it a good idea? Not a good habit. Shulchan Aruch makes a point of saying that after being intimate, the husband goes back to his bed. And there's something very powerful about that. It prevents the intimacy from becoming sloppy. But certainly if a wife enjoys the company and makes her happy, isn't it hate? But know that there's something very positive and very powerful about separate beds, about separate spaces, and that intimacy means coming together, not just finding yourself together by default. So it's there is a definite benefit to keeping separate beds, even when you don't have to.
Okay, so you actually answered the next question. This is a string of questions in one submit, which was, what if they were already intimate? And you answered that. A couple more along the same lines. What if you're traveling and staying in a hotel room with one bed? Should that be avoided?
Yes.
Okay. And again, all right, got that. Is it proper for a couple to be intimate when there are guests staying over in their house?
If there's a lock on the door and you have total privacy, there's no problem.
Okay. If there's no way to do this without having an infant in the room, halakhically acceptable, but it may prove to be distracting. What's the eitzah?
It's not only possibly distracting, it's not good for the child. There has to be a mechitza. There's all sorts of halachas about that.
Even if the child is sleeping, there's neshama
Even
stuff
if he's
going.
sleeping, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you have to look it up. There's a bunch of halachas about that. But some people were machmed that there shouldn't be any living creature in the room. They wouldn't allow a cat in the room. So just look up the Shulchan Aruch. It's clear. If the child is sleeping, if he's less than 3 months old or something, just look it up.
Got it. What is the appropriate amount of time to stay intimately intimate? When should one separate, and what are the appropriate steps?
You don't rush. Not like you do what you have to do and run away. You have to stay a half hour or whatever, and be friendly. Then you go back to your bed.
But
so you don't make it abrupt. You don't like you're running away. Stay until everybody gets tired and sleepy, and then you go to your own bed.
I think the question is more along the lines of intimately intimate, meaning when husband and wife are connected the way husband and wife do in this type of setting, how much time is spent in that position?
The longer the better. Longer the better. Be patient and to delay finishing until your wife is satisfied, or that's a big virtue, and that's great for the kids that are born. That's why Isha Mazras Tchila, you let the Zohar, because you waited and you let her finish first. It's a big positive.
Okay,
so no hurrying. Contrary.
So that leads into a string of other questions that came through, and I'm going to get to them in a second. But one other on this chain, which is Being on top is very uncomfortable as I must hold myself up with my arms so as not to weigh down on my wife. Is there a position I can keep which is appropriate and not uncomfortable? In this position, I end up thinking more about keeping myself up than about connecting with her. And then Karen said, which I think is interesting, the anonymous questioner ends off, I hope these questions are appropriate. I haven't felt comfortable to ask in any other setting. And to whoever sent it in, I say, God bless you, and if nothing else, that's what we're here for.
Yeah, and it's a very good question. And I remember hearing Rav Paskin that if that's what makes the difference in their relationship, then certainly position can be changed. But let me just tell you what the significance of the man on top, in case you haven't heard. The significance of the man on top is two things. Number one, when you're recreating, when you're becoming the creator, you're making a baby, you have to draw your strength from your source, where you came from. Since Adam was created from the earth, man should be facing the earth. That's why he's on top. It's not a question of top and bottom, but it's a question of what are you facing. The man should be facing the earth. Chava was created from Adam, so Chava should be facing the husband, and which means that she's facing up. Now, the face-to-face is absolutely significant and doesn't even need explaining, because that's personal. Whereas not face-to-face makes it a little more mechanical or impersonal. Now, with the woman on top, the Gemara says something about turning the table upside down, and that it's not the best. So, for the baby making purpose, it's best if the man is facing the earth and the woman is facing the man. Another reason is that whoever's on the bottom becomes the foundation, and whoever's on top adds the details. So if the woman is on the bottom, then she gives the life, and the husband gives the gender, be a boy, something like that. But the holiness of it is that you're recreating the way you were created. So if at all possible, that's the way it should be done. Not, you do what you can, you do your best. But I've never heard of a woman being crushed by her husband, even if the husband is much bigger than her. So unless she's complaining, I don't think you have to worry about it.
Okay, Rabbi, I just want to a footnote as we move forward here. It's rather remarkable how you're able to navigate through this in an edela and refined way, and it's appreciated by all. Okay, here's the next question. If my kavanah needs to be pleasing her and seeing to her happiness, so as a practical medical question, how do you deal with premature early ejaculation? This leaves her hanging and definitely defeats the purpose of her time, and also leaves the man feeling unconfident in his ability to do what he's got to.
Yeah. Well, there's the spiritual consideration, the emotional consideration, and the physical consideration. Let's start at the top. The spiritual consideration is that if you finish too quickly, it means you're not really functioning as a mashpia. Because if you're a mashpia, then you're concerned with her, and then this wouldn't happen. So it could be that you need to build yourself up, that you're not just a person, a victim of your body, but you're there with a job, with a role, with a purpose. You're the mashpia. You're there for her, and you do what's best for her, and then the body obeys and does what it needs to do. But if you're not feeling like a mashpia, then the body is hefker, and these things will happen. That's spiritually. Emotionally, there's also this personality type or habit of not completing a job, quitting before it's over. And it probably is true in other areas of life also. You start a project, you get 90% done, and you quit. So this also, finishing too quickly is like starting a job and then losing interest and just ending it. And so it's not like you completed the job, like you just lost interest midway. So you have to look at your habit, at your nature. Are you premature in other projects and in other things, like studying a subject and you get to know 90%, you quit, or whatever. At work, you do the same, and start to practice paying attention to completing the job. I don't know, we have here in Minnesota a company, a construction company or handyman, whatever it's called. Their name is the last 10%. And they're making a living finishing up the last 10% of all the people who start their own projects and can't finish it. So the last 10%, should get more attention in all things. In conversations, in davening, the last 10% you kind of quit, and so on. Then the third thing is Pasha Begashmi is you need some remedy, some vitamins, something to strengthen the system, so that you have more control. I don't mean chemicals, which are dangerous, the Viagra medicines that are killing people. I mean, healthy stuff that just builds up your system. And mentioned Chassanim, that if we are disciplined inside of our marriage when it comes to intimacy and sexuality, if it's all disciplined, if it's all orderly and masuda inside the marriage, then there's no likelihood that there's going to be a problem outside the marriage, because your intimate life is structured. You know where it belongs, and you know where what's right and what's wrong, and so on. But if inside the marriage there's a hefkedus, you do whatever you want, whenever you want, however you want, then why shouldn't that carry over, God forbid, into sexuality outside the marriage? Charity begins at home if you practice it at home. So if a structured intimacy exists at home, then it's safer for the couple, for the marriage. So a more structured intimacy might also help. If you know what nights, what time of the night, the more structure you give it, the more it becomes real, and it's not just a fleeting feeling. You can't control, and it's here, and it's there, and it's gone before you know it. So you get a better handle on your own sexuality if you give it more structure. And this is something nobody wants to hear, and we not only don't like it, but we think it's wrong, that it's unnatural, because we have this impression that the intimacy should be spontaneous, whenever you feel like it, however you feel. It's just fun and games, but it doesn't work that way. It really doesn't. It's good for magazines and for television shows, and it looks exciting, but in reality, the better handle you have on it, the better it is, the more satisfying, the more pleasurable. And that's why everybody's on Viagra, because there's such a hefketus, there's such a guilty seder, that it just doesn't work anymore. So those 3 things, or 4 things, should be considered.
Excellent. A string of questions just came in regarding specific situations on mikvah nights, traveling, etc. To the questioner, I'm going to refer that to Rav, because those are clearly situation-based, and that needs a rabbinic psak. That's not a hashkafa thing. Another question just came in the second call, I believe it was. There was Rabbi Friedman made a comment about not using hands below the waist. Can you please elaborate on what that means?
It means that in modern America, like with President Clinton, we have a bit of a confusion and a blurring of what's considered intimacy, what's considered a relationship. And what's going on is that it used to be that even by simple purim, by the average farmer in middle America, there were certain things that decent people didn't do. It was like out of the question. Nobody would ever think of such a thing. Nobody would ever accept such a thing. And that's what created the pornography industry. Pornography showed those things that the average decent person would never do, would never consider, would never allow. So those who wanted to be entertained by it would go to these sleazy places, and be ashamed to be caught there, because it really was considered below the accepted level. By simple people, by even grubber people, but that was already beyond the pale. And what it basically was is the activities that are not really natural or proper intimacy. It's with oral sex and manual and objects, every kind of distortion of the real thing. And nobody took it seriously, because that's not intimacy. You never do that with your wife. That's just for entertainment or for prostitutes or for... But today, the sad fact is that the average teenager, the average college student, would rather do the pornographic thing than the real thing. It's less complicated, it's less personal, you don't have to get involved with people, you don't have to be face-to-face, you don't have to get to know them, and you call it making love. You love it, you don't love her. And the danger is that when it comes to really having intimacy, there's a loss of interest, because the other is easier, it's quicker, it's more enjoyable if you're impatient, and it's less complicated. You don't really have to care about a person. You don't even have to look at the person. So the danger of using your hands is that it becomes an alternative to the real thing, and the real thing loses its... and that's what the Gemara says, that if you don't let your husband's hands be below your waist, his passion for you will never fade. In other words, it won't be replaced by something that is not really intimacy at all. It's just playing doctor as an adult. So again, is it allowed? Of course it's allowed. That's why the Tana had to tell his daughter, as good advice, not to allow it. But halachically, of course, it is allowed, and if it's already happened, then fine. Then you know what it is, and you can move on. And if it hasn't happened yet, then don't go there.
Okay, so I'm going to jump ahead actually to the third page of questions with another question here, which reads: if the husband would just focus on intimacy and in this case not use hands, I feel it would be difficult for the spouse to have an orgasm. Is there a point and a responsibility to make your wife have an orgasm?
No, there's not. This whole orgasm thing is such a disaster. It has turned intimacy into some kind of a contest, into some kind of a performance. I think I mentioned the most vulgar thing that a man or woman can say to each other after being intimate is the question, how was it? It is an object, not a person. How was it means that instead of being with her, you were doing it, and you want to know how it came out, how it worked, how it felt. That's terrible. That is mamish pornography. It's not about her, it's about it. And this orgasm business has become like a curse, and it's terrible for what it does to people. A woman who doesn't have orgasm feels something's wrong with her. If he can't, it's really very, very mechanical and artificial. It's how bonded you became to each other, not how much excitement you can drain out of your body. Now, that's like people. I mean, you have to compare it to eating. You sit down to eat a meal, and it's a good, healthy meal. Yeah, but it wasn't dynamite, you know. Like the advertisements, this taste, this flavor explodes in your mouth. I mean, well, what is that? It's manipulating the body, pushing it beyond its normal limits. I don't know. But no, orgasm is not the objective, and that's what it means. Ava she'ena tluya b'davar. If orgasm is the objective, then it's a tluya b'davar. Then if the orgasm doesn't happen, you're disappointed with her, you're disappointed with you. The people are devastated because it didn't happen. And that should never be the case.
So that's another example. That's a very pointed example of how secular education has crept into our society.
Oh, yeah.
Where...
Oh, yeah. Now,
right.
They say that some people enjoy mechanical stimulation to the real thing, and that maybe that's true. Some people enjoy treifa candy more than kosher candy. So what? Kosher candy is good. It's kosher, and it's healthy, and v'chol. So the fact that something can be more enjoyable, I mean, that's gluttony. I can't enjoy something unless it's the absolute, like the advertisements for the aspirins and for the extra strength and maximum strength. Maximum. We have to have the maximum. So the comedian says, "What's maximum? How do you know what maximum is?" Because you figure out what dose will kill me, and then give me a little less than that. That's like the maximum that I can take without it killing me. That's not totally not necessary, and it should not be the goal or the objective of the intimacy.
But to some extent, you're redefining what pleasure is on the female partner. If it's not something intense like this quote-unquote orgasm is suggesting, then what is pleasure? On a physical sense, what is the pleasure that is trying to be accomplished, and how does one go about doing that?
Here's the important rule. Babies are made from pleasure. That's how you make a baby. The greater the pleasure, the healthier the baby. And that's why in many cases where you have very holy people and they really can't get into it, their children are kind of weak and sickly and not healthy. So the pleasure has to be there, because pleasure gives life. Pleasure is life. Tainug is synonymous with life. So from your tainug, you create a baby. Condition, of course, is that it has to be the tainug of the intimacy, not some other tainug. I'll get very specific. We talked about that the zera is different depending on what the taiva is, what the interest is. So it says, for example, in Swadim, that when you wake up with an erection, you should not have intimacy, but start all over again. And the intimacy should be a result of your interest in your wife, not of some natural bodily function. Because it's a different intimacy, it's a different zera, and you have a different quality child. So if you're using manual stimulation or whatever, this is not the pleasure of intimacy. So what should the pleasure be, if not orgasm? The pleasure should be how much do you enjoy each other. It's not how was it, it's how was I. The pleasure, any other pleasure that you add to the intimacy is a foreign ingredient. Doesn't belong. So, for example, if you're being intimate in a park, and there's a danger that somebody will come, and that adds excitement because it's dangerous, where it's daring, but that's not the pleasure of intimacy. That's the pleasure of risk. It's like bungee jumping. It doesn't belong in the intimacy, and that's not what makes the baby. So what should be the pleasure? The pleasure should be that you have each other. Pleasure should be being with each other, doing this together, and achieving a real intimacy. That's a whole different pleasure. It's much more real. You walk away feeling good about yourself. Orgasm is just exhausting. There's nothing meaningful to it. So if it happens, it happens. If not, not. That should never be the goal. The goal should be, I'm here to be with you or to please you with my presence, with my devotion, not with some kind of a mechanical or acrobatic gimmick.
Does it make sense to say that when a husband and wife have true intimacy the way you're talking, then by default it must mean that they really, really, really like each other?
Yes, shocking, isn't it? Yes, that's what it means. It means they really each other.
It may also mean that they like themselves and they're comfortable in their own skin.
That would be good too.
Okay.
Be good.
Don't know if we have time in the next 30 minutes to jam it all in, but I'm going to keep plowing at it. You mentioned before that as counterintuitive as it sounds to the spontaneous life, there should be set nights. How rigid should one be as far as set nights?
Never be rigid. Never be rigid. If you see that your wife is interested, you go. You do it. You never refuse. And there's no rigidity. But if there's a structure, people know what to expect. It helps, even if you make exceptions to the rule. Because you're in control of your intimacy rather than it controlling you. So it's not a matter of rigid, not making new halachas, but you're giving it some structure, some predictability, some stability, something you can expect. You know what to expect. That's very helpful. And it also changes the whole. I mean, even eating. Doctors say that if you eat at the same time every day, it is much healthier than if you eat at a different time every day. Getting up in the morning. What time do you get up in the morning? If there is no time, if it's every day different, it disrupts your life. Even going to the bathroom should have a schedule so that your body knows what you expect it to do, and it does it. Otherwise, there's a letter somebody wrote to the Rebbe saying that they're emotionally confused, conflicted, they have mood swings, whatever, I don't know exactly how he describes it. And the Rebbe says to him, or to her, get a job that demands that you be there at a certain hour and stay a certain amount of time. And when your day takes some shape and has some order, then your emotions will become orderly as well. So if your activities don't have a structure, then emotionally you become a little disoriented and confused. So no rigid, but just an outline of what your life looks like. Because the truth is, you do eventually get into habit. And you do end up repeating and doing things again and again in the same way. But you didn't choose it. So you might as well do it intentionally instead of just being a victim of your habits.
Here's another question.
This doesn't interfere with spontaneity. If you schedule something for Tuesday, that means that when Tuesday comes, you can't be spontaneous about it. Of course, you can be. If there's a lack of spontaneity, there's something. It's not the schedule that's doing it. It's some rigidity in your thinking or in your emotions. That shouldn't happen. And that's why Seichel doesn't interfere with Midas. Your Midas are supposed to be according to Seichel. Does that mean you're never spontaneous, you never do anything with enthusiasm because you always have to stop and think and be cold and calculated? No, on the contrary. Midas that come from Seichel are completely spontaneous. Because once the Seichel gives the go-ahead, then you're so confident you know what you're doing, you can be spontaneous. Whereas if you never really thought about it, and now you're going to be spontaneous, you get a little caught, a little worried. Wait, where am I going? What's going to happen? I got to rethink this, and that kills the spontaneity. So when there's a structure and you know what to expect, and this is the night, and so on, the night of the mikveh, for example, does that ruin spontaneity? It doesn't. So it actually helps.
How so?
Because the structure gives you the security and the confidence that allows you to just be spontaneous. Because now you've checked it out, it's okay, it's safe, go for it. You haven't checked it out, you haven't decided, it's not on the schedule, you're just gripped by a mood, part of your mind is saying, wait a minute, maybe not. You're not confident. So, Seichel does not interfere with Midas.
What to be done in the case where the wife is either refusing intimacy, or in the case where she appreciates the physical closeness but does not like the act of intimacy and doesn't want to go there?
Well, first you talk to a Rav, then you talk to a doctor. Or maybe the other way around. Talk to a doctor and then talk to a Rav. Or she should talk to a mashpi and find out what's wrong, what's interfering here. Hopefully it's not him. She's not turned off to him.
How to have intimate relationships with your wife and have the proper kavanah when she is rabbinically mandated to be taking some sort of pill for control?
Birth control?
Yeah.
The birth control does in some subtle way interfere with mashpia and makabel. If she has to protect herself, then it's not, the being receptive 100% is 99%. Even if it's al pi halacha with the Rav and the heter and everything else. So the heter should not be casually or carelessly used. Use it when it's necessary, and when it's not necessary, then don't interfere. Let the mashpia mekabel functions do their thing. But when it's al pi halacha that she has to be taking birth control, then you should be very happy for her that she's safe. There is such a thing, and that Chabad is very makel, more than most, in allowing birth control and using birth control, even for spacing children. Because the Tzemach Tzedek set the tone that okay, and ein lanu elo das Tzemach Tzedek. So the Rebbe was very makel, and the Rabbonim are makel. I mean makel. That's how we paskin. So we should be thankful for that. Good thing.
Going back for a second, we asked the question.
I know of a case where the Rebbe asked somebody in Yechidus, what's going on with your wife? He had no idea why the Rebbe was asking that. So he came home and he asked his wife what's going on, and she said, I was afraid to say anything, but I can't handle any more children. So he asked the Rebbe, told the Rebbe what, and the Rebbe said to go to a Rav, not a big machmir, but a Rav al pi Shulchan Aruch. In other words, get a heter. So the Rebbe actually initiated. The guy never even asked about it. But the Rebbe knew that the wife was anxious about it, so he suggested to a Rav and get a heter.
To the questions that are coming in on this topic, I'm gonna beg your forgiveness. I'm not going to entertain further birth control questions. We're going to stay focused on the topic here. For further on that topic, perhaps we could do this at a later date. Back on track here. We asked about if the woman, if the wife, is not interested in intimacy or likes the closeness but not the actual intimate activity. What if it's the husband that is not interested in intimacy?
The same thing. You have to either talk to a doctor or to a Rav, but it's got to get fixed. Of course, there are ways of fixing. Every problem has its solution, but it should be fixed quickly. It should not drag. Delay.
Got it.
And if you could go to a homeopath, that would be even better.
Yeah. Anyone that you'd recommend?
Not really. If somebody calls me, I can give, depends where they live, the closest one. But just to give out a name, I don't know.
Got it. Another question here. You said that for couples that have experienced hands below the waist, cut it out. Those that haven't, no need to go there. The question reads, when a woman only enjoys manual, isn't it the most important to care for her needs? Wouldn't it be egotistic to do it only the regular way and end up only enjoying yourself while she's left wanting something else?
So again, what a wife wants, and you know that she wants it, of course you do it. But certainly you shouldn't be the one to introduce it simply because you're allowed to do it. If there's a desire, yes, of course you do it. But if there's no desire, then leave it alone. Don't go there. I'm not saying refuse. In the Gemara, the father was telling the daughter not to allow it. But if the daughter wants, she doesn't take her father's advice, then the husband should. But even that, there are certain limits. The lights still have to be off, and you don't. It says in Shulchan Aruch, you don't become a novel b'reshus Torah. So, out of respect for your wife and out of respect for yourself, there are certain things that even Goyim wouldn't do 30 years ago. Keep your dignity.
How do you reconcile approaching intimacy with total bittul and the praiseworthy relations a couple will have when the husband feels very aroused and wants to avoid sinning?
Try that again. He's very aroused, he wants to avoid sinning, and what the problem is?
How do you reconcile with approaching intimacy with total bittul?
Total bittul. Total bittul doesn't mean that I don't feel anything, I don't need anything, and I don't care. Total bittul means whatever I'm feeling, it's all part of the Eibishter's plan. It's the way the Eibishter created us. It's the way babies are made. It's not all about me. I'm feeling it, and I'm experiencing it, and that's very real. But it's not really about me. It's a bigger reality than just me. So you're not denying yourself. You're not denying your feelings, your needs, your urges, your weaknesses, etc., etc., etc. But you're saying, all of that is the way I was created. There's a tachlis for it all. There's a purpose to it all. And I want to stay on target. Like it says in Tanya there in Pedig, whatever, Lamed Aleph, that a person should realize how horrible and disgusting he is, but at the end he should also make a cheshbon. So who created me this way? With a Yetzer Hara, with machshavas zoros, and so on and so on and so on. I didn't do this to myself. I was created this way because there's a tachlis to it, because there's a purpose for it. That's the bittul. But the bittul is not self-denial or self-deception. Any sense? I'm not sure.
No, I think you clarified that one. Another question just came in, along with others, that I do see the hand that's raised on the screen. I'll get to that in a minute for the live question. We've been talking about where wife should not allow her husband's hands. What's the proper usage of the wife's hands on the husband's body?
Sometimes the husband needs a little help, but not stimulation. So she can guide him, but not manually stimulate. Because if he's not stimulated by the thought of her, then it's not completely ideal. It's the thought of her that should be stimulating. But if she wants to help guide the husband, that's sometimes necessary, and that's respectful and dignified. There's no downside to it.
So going a drop deeper and flipping things around from the earlier part of the conversation about orgasms being experienced by the female partner, if there's a notion or a past experience on the male partner, the husband, that there's extreme levels, or as you put it before, maximum pleasure that he could experience that's not coming through the act of intimacy, then am I understanding you correctly to say stay away from that because it's a thing, it'll be a distraction, and that's not the real pleasure that is going to make healthy babies?
Yeah. But again, if there's a real taiva and there's a real pull, don't be overly firm about it. You know what I mean? Don't ignore. Elevate your interest. Move yourself to a better desire. Don't make believe or refuse the desires that you do have. So be realistic and idealistic at the same time. Don't give up on the idealism simply because realistically you're not on the higher level. So you'll be there tomorrow, next week. But grow.
Is there a rationale that says if my partner doesn't get what they're looking for here, they'll get it elsewhere. Therefore, I need to provide it for them, even though it's not the ideal?
That's a horrible thought. No, that's not part of the cheshbon at all. Off the chart. I do want to mention something that we talked about with the Chassanim. You have to take a long-range view, not be short-sighted. You marry this woman, and you're going to be married to her 10 years from now. In these 10 years, what effect are you going to have on her? It's like if people were to chart the 10 years that you're together, and people would say, I knew that girl when she got married, and being married to her husband has had the effect on her that she became fill in the blank. What is being married to you done to her? What is it supposed to do for her? I mean, there are people who say, I don't like some of these chumras, I don't like all of these shtick, I just want to do it. And 10 years later, the woman who says that, 10 years later, her husband is barely orthodox. Is this what you really wanted? This is what you wanted to do to him? This is what you wanted in your vision and picture of marriage? That being married to you would make a person less edel and less yireh shamayim and less frum, or less mature, or less responsible, less happy? What is your goal? Because you're having a powerful effect on your wife. Keep an eye on that. What are you doing to her? Where are you leading her? Because she'll follow. Are you leading her up or down? Are you making her more of a mensch or less of a mensch? It's a serious consideration. Because you don't want to have to think after 10, 15 years of marriage, what did I do to her? She used to be a happy, healthy girl. What have I done to her? She used to be edel. She used to enjoy a mitzvah, a yontif. Now she resents it. She hates it. She's bored with it. What did I do to her? So that's why the idealism is not really so idealistic. It's really realistic. You want to have a good marriage. You want to be married to a good woman. Well, don't turn her into something you're not going to like 10, 15 years from now. And people think, I just wanted her to be a little less frum in this area. I didn't mean all areas. Well, you can't be that picky. So let's make our wives really not only physically content, like the advertisements and the books and the movies. Let's make a mensch out of each other. Let's elevate our lifestyles, our ideals, our character, the good old-fashioned idea. We will grow more dignified. We will grow more edel together. That's what marriage is. Having a girlfriend outside of marriage means let's go down. We were just joking about this. I think it's really funny. We were talking about the expression that really should be discontinued. A head shliach brings down another shliach. How many shluchim have you brought down? I say, why do we bring them down? What is this? And then to make it even funnier, when a criminal is caught, what is the expression? He was picked up by the police. So criminals get picked up and shluchim get brought down? This is not nice. So in the Goyish world, in the non-frum world, men and women bring each other down. They use each other, they get bored with each other, and they move on to somebody else. Marriage is supposed to bring us up in all areas. Your wife becomes more mature, she becomes more secure, She becomes wiser, stronger, healthier, happier, because you're having a good effect. So take those things into consideration and don't get distracted by the temporary little pleasures that only satisfy a Yetzer Hara, nothing else. But again, I don't mean to be prudish or inflexible. Live your life and try to make it better.
I'm going to take a live question. Michael, thanks for your patience. You have the mic. Go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
We got you. Go ahead.
Hello? Hi.
Yes.
Hi, Rabbi Freeman. I apologize for being late, and if this question was already asked, I'm sorry. However, I've heard different shittas when it comes to a husband interacting with his wife. Sometimes he may perceive her as being too sensitive or whatnot. I've heard one shitta that it takes both sides, that you have to talk this out, and that maybe she might have an issue on her end with communication. I've heard the other end that really you're 100% responsible, and if she's sensitive, you know, regardless of how you could do about that, like, you have to deal with that, and you have to sort of just like go forward and try to, you know, even if you may perceive as if she's being too sensitive, you have to cater to that. So I'd like to hear your opinion as to when a husband has a wife who he thinks may be a little too sensitive to certain issues, and it may maybe not necessarily cause issues, but add fuel to the fire, and it's a little difficult to navigate in talking about sensitive topics. What would your opinion be? What would your advice be to such a person?
Well, if either the husband or the wife, and sometimes the husband is the sensitive one, if either the husband or the wife have an issue, there's something they don't like in the intimacy, but they're afraid to say it or ashamed to talk about it, or they're not even clear as to what it is that's bothering them, then talking to a mashpia, to a doctor, to a rav, might help them put it into words, and then they can communicate it. But it's absolutely proper that if something bothers the wife, she should say so. Not during the intimacy. Before. Just in conversation. And the same with the husband. If you know what's bothering you, say it. That could clear up the problem right there. You don't have to go to a rav or to a doctor. But if you don't know what the problem is, then you have to go consult. So if you know, talk. Say, I don't like that. That makes me uncomfortable. I don't like it this way. I like it the other way. And it might sound like you're being petty, that you're being grub, but if that's the truth, that's what you go with. Somebody said to me once, I'm going with a girl, and everything's good, everything's fine, but I don't know, something is stopping me from making the decision, from going ahead. So I said, is she blonde or brunette? He says, what's that got to do with anything? I said, do you prefer blondes or brunettes? He says, that's shtusim. I said, answer the question. Do you prefer blondes or brunettes? He said, that's Yetzer Hara talk. I said, you're trying to get married without your Yetzer Hara? You're going to leave your Yetzer Hara in your mother's apartment? What are you... You're getting married with your Yetzer Hara. Talk to me. You like blondes or brunettes? The reason he couldn't make the decision is because she was not his physical type. His Yetzer Hara was not interested. But he was too ashamed to say it. Not good. You're getting married with a Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara is going to only make things worse if you don't deal with it. So say it. And if it's a Yetzer Hara, then work on it. But don't deny it. So you move your Yetzer Hara up a rung, that's where your reality is, and that's what you have to deal with. Live there. So until you're on a higher level, You don't act like you're on the higher level. You got to be where you are and then move yourself upwards to the next level. So, yeah, you have to talk, absolutely. Keeping a secret and just being resentful, why doesn't he figure it out himself? Doesn't he realize that I don't like this? No, don't do that. Don't be difficult. Something's bothering you, say it. And if you know that something's bothering your wife and she's not saying it, find an opportunity to ask. Open the conversation. At psachle.
Rabbi, do you have the ability to extend for about an extra 10 minutes?
Sure.
Okay, so I'm going to throw a couple more questions. Here's an interesting one that just came in. I'm going to try and, sounds like it was written in Yiddish and thought in Yiddish and translated into English. I'm going to try and read it in English. If intimacy is coming together as one by taking away everything that separates us and losing ourselves to become that one, then how is it that the exact moment that we experience something, then at that moment it's impossible to think about anything else but our own pleasures?
There's a pleasure that separates and there's a pleasure that brings together.
Perhaps you could reword that question. Can you reword that in your own? I'm not 100% sure I understood what it's asking.
I think what it's saying is that when you get to the climax, you're so aware of your own pleasure. How can you be selfless? How can you not get caught up in your own pleasure? So I'm not saying don't get caught up in pleasure. I'm saying get caught up in the right pleasure, in the pleasure of being with her, not in the pleasure of your body enjoying itself. Because the gufim are what separate us. The nefesh is what connects us. So if we're focused on the person, which is the nefesh, I don't mean the chelik elaka mimal. I mean pasha the nefesh, the personality, the person. You're focused on the person, that is a pleasure. And coming together that way is a pleasure. But it's not a pleasure that separates. It's not an it, it's an us. That's the chush. The chush is not to not have pleasure. Not having pleasure is dangerous. Dangerous for the children. You have to have pleasure. The pleasure of achdus, the pleasure of merging, not the pleasure of your own personal, separate experience. That's where the catch is. They're both pleasure and they're both intense and they both happen at the same time. And that's why even with the best intentions, the most able husband and wife will not always achieve real intimacy. Because you do get distracted. So an ava she'eina tluya b'davar is a rare thing. But it's a goal. It's an objective. Something to strive for. If we try and we succeed a few times, it's fantastic. Makes the marriage very real.
Here's another question, a bit of a different angle. Is it beneficial or detrimental for children to see their parents touch each other in an affectionate way? If yes, how often and how much?
It should not be visible, but it should be heard. Children should hear the affection in their tone, the way they talk to each other, the way they deal with each other, the way they look out for each other. That should show the affection, not physical. By the Frierdiker Rebbe, he writes that even between his father and himself, his father didn't show affection by a pat on the back or a hug, and he didn't show dissatisfaction with a patch or with a... He was much more personal than that. So, between husband and wife, Jewish custom and Edelkeit dictates that you don't raise children to think that affection is only physical. So for a baby, you give a kiss, a baby, but that's baby stuff. It's not the real affection. Real affection means devotion, derecheret, putting the other person before yourself.
So I love you, honey, and you're my sweetheart is not affection. That's stam babel.
Yeah, anything that becomes a cliche, becomes just repeat the same thing. I love you, I love you, I love you. It's a nadish.
So you're demonstrating it, you're not saying it.
Right. And when you say it, you mean it.
Right. I asked you this question when we were on with the Chassanim, and I'm going to beg your pardon and do the same thing here. Before the course, I got a call from somebody who calls himself a Chassan educator. He gave me his 2 cents on what we were doing. Most of it was positive. He had a little bit of critical stuff. And then he said to me, I take issue with Rabbi Friedman because he speaks Yechuda Ilah, and, halavai, people should walk away with Yechuda Tata. And as we come to close of 4 hours of learning together and I think being quite open and frank and honest with each other, I'm hearing you say, Chevra, you're real, don't deny that, but don't forget about the fact that there's a Nefesh HaBahamas and Nefesh HaLekis, and start paying close attention to the Nefesh HaLekis, because that's what's really all about. And at the same time, I'm not telling you to never experience pleasure in your life. So what's the takeaway? Here we are. I think for the most part, questions that wanted to be asked were asked, and the answers, we didn't skirt any issues, and I think it was pretty, for the skeptical out there who thought Rabbi Friedman can't be practical, I beg to pardon. But here we are at the top of this. What's the Poel Mamish? If you can say it one more time, what do you want us to walk away with from this educational experience?
A few things. First of all, where do you get the impression that if you follow your Yetzer Hara, you'll have pleasure? Not following the Yetzer Hara means no pleasure. That's not true. The real pleasure that a human being has does not come from a Yetzer Hara, because a Yetzer Hara's appetite never gets satisfied, because it doesn't really mean it. It doesn't really want it. It doesn't really need what it demands. So it's a bottomless pit. You never get satisfied. So it's a pleasure that leads to frustration, whereas real pleasure is real. It's not only enjoyable, it's also satisfying. So the pleasure of intimacy is a very real, intense pleasure. It's just not the pleasure of a quick, cheap thrill that the Yetzer Hara demands. I don't mean to compare ourselves, but who was it who was actually heavy, overweight, because of the tainug that he had from saying Amen Yehi Shmei Rabba? It's real. It's a real tainug. The body feels the tainug, but it's not the Yetzer Hara's tainug. It's the real thing. So that's number one. It's not like if you're good and you do the right thing, you have no pleasure. You have the right pleasure, the true pleasure. Number two, this guy's criticism is absolutely correct. He says you're talking Yechuda Ilah, and halavai they should come away with Yechuda Tata. Absolutely true. But what if I was talking about Yechuda Tata? Then halavai they should come away with what? You know what I'm saying? You set yourself a goal, and you know that people are going to fall short. So if you set yourself a tiny little goal, when people fall short, they end up with nothing, because the whole goal was just barely something. You have to set your goal higher so that if you fall short, you still have something valuable. At least Yechuda Tata. So that's correct. Number three. It just so happens that this generation is exceptional and is capable of things that were difficult and almost impossible for earlier generations. I mean, everybody knows that hiskashrus in our generation is in some way much greater than it was in previous generations. Previous generations, you had maybe a handful of mekusharim. Today, the average chassid, the average bacher in yeshiva, is mekusher. And maybe it's because we're not as smart, we're not as deep. Remember the story with Rabbi Yosef Balagola. The Rebbe told him to become a Balagola. He went through conniptions. What's going to be with my learning? I'm a Talmud Chacham. What am I doing with a horse and a wagon? It was so hard for him. And the reason it was hard for him is because he was so special. For us, it's not so hard because we're not so special. You know, like, what are we giving up to be Mekusha? Very little. So it's much easier for us to do what has to be done because we don't have all this baggage, good baggage, that previous generations had. So we can expect better things, greater things from people in our generation than in previous generations. So selling ourselves short, saying, no, we're not shaykh to these things, we're more shaykh than previous generations. And maybe it's because we don't know enough to even disagree. So when we hear something should be done, we do it. Because we don't have our own opinion. We didn't learn enough, we don't know enough to even form our own opinion. And so we do what needs to be done. So there's a certain emes, there's a certain gilui of atzmus, the thing the way it is without embellishment, because we don't know how to embellish. We don't have ava v'yira, so we just do what we're told. You have ava v'yira, you're kind of preoccupied. So the same thing that makes us lower than previous generations also makes us more capable of great things than previous generations. Well, like for example, in previous generations, you had to be emes and you had to be on that madrega. Otherwise, what are you doing? Who are you kidding? You're not on that madrega. Rebbe Rashab said to somebody, he saw him washing 3 times on each hand, and he said, for a person like you to just do it without thinking why and the purpose of it, passt nicht. For us, we wash 3 times on each hand, it's perfect. So we shouldn't sell ourselves or our generation short. Because we're not busy with Ava V'Yira, that's why we can focus better on the Eibishter himself. And that's why we're capable of things that only great tzaddikim used to be capable of. The average tzaddik was not, because he was a tzaddik. So in some way, the fact that we're not tzaddikim enables us to do great things. And particularly when it comes to intimacy. We are a generation that has seen or has heard that the non-Adler way of doing it doesn't work. It's a disaster. It destroys marriages. It diminishes people. It makes you ashamed of yourself. It just doesn't work. Not even for Goyim. It doesn't work. A couple of generations ago, we thought, wow, if we could do that, we would be so much happier. I look at people who have the freedom to do what they want. They're so much healthier. Every psychologist knows that the freedom, the sexual freedom, has been a disaster for people. So we don't need a big Aveda to convince us that we got to do it right. Because the other way just doesn't work. That has been the vast experiment of the 60s and 70s. It doesn't work. We don't need Gzeras HaKosov. We know it, we see it, we hear it, we even see the effects of it. You talk to people who grew up in that environment, and they're Shiva Kalim. They're barely human. So we don't want to go there. We know a better way, and we can do it. So we definitely shouldn't lower our standards or expect less of ourselves. It's realistic and it's good. So the final word is like this. Marriage is a long-term plan. You're going to be married to your wife for a long time. Make it good. Do the right thing for her. Make sure that she benefits greatly from being married to you. Everybody knows in their own level and their own way what that benefit should be. But don't get careless. Don't get sloppy. Don't think, she'll be whatever she wants to be. It's not my business. That's not a marriage. It is your business because you are having the biggest effect on her more than anybody else in her life. Have a good effect. Don't get careless about that. And if that's your attitude, things will be good. Binyan ad deyad.
Amen.
With ava v'achva shalom v'reus. These things are not ridiculously idealistic. They're not unrealistic. They're absolutely necessary. If they're necessary, then we do it. It has to happen. We find a way. Make it happen. So be the husband. Take responsibility. Visualize what you want to do for your wife, how you want her to be 10 years from now. Of course, the kids will make a difference too, but you got to know what you want to do. So that, and after 15 years of marriage, people will say, wow, since she married what's his name, she has grown a lot. Wouldn't that be a great compliment?
Rabbi?
Yeah.
You sound like a kid in a candy store. But
that's what Hasidus is. Before Hasidus, Yiddishkeit was a hardware store, and not even Home Depot. And Hasidus came along and turned Yiddishkeit into a candy store. There's so much that is Geschmack that it's pleasure.
I could see the Masifta starting to advertise that. Come join our yeshiva. We'll teach you how to turn hardware into candy.